I guess you realize I'm missing somebody sitting next to me. He is here. He's just voting right now because they're allowed to vote. He'll be joining us in a second unless he... Come on out, Minister. You can vote. Did you vote yet? Yes. Do you want me to vote for you? I can handle it.
Yeah, it depends which way you're going to vote. We don't have a history of being on the same side.
I just know that your whip wouldn't be happy with your vote if I was voting for you.
That's right.
So welcome. And you're on a bit of a whirlwind tour lately. Like, do you know what city you're in right now? You feel like a rock star being all over the place with all these announcements?
Yeah, look, as long as I wake up with some clean laundry to wear, I'll do fine. But I think I'm in Toronto.
You are definitely in Toronto. And I know yesterday you spoke at the Canadian Club in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And Carol Sabb, actually, from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, a good friend of mine, moderated it. And I'm wondering, maybe you can just give us a high-level kind of synopsis of what you said. And I'm going to say, I know you can just fill 20 minutes on that because I've seen you in action. So we're going to keep it to a bit of a short précis just to give an overview of the announcements you've been making over the last 5 days.
Yeah, sure. So look, the message yesterday to the Canadian Club was we have to acknowledge that we're in a housing crisis right now. It's having a serious impact on people at an individual and household level that we can't ignore, but it's also throttling our collective economic potential. The good news that I take from the meetings that I've had over the last 8.5 months and the policies that we've been rolling out more recently is that we can solve the housing crisis. I'm filled with a sense of optimism most days because I'm dealing with the people who are implementing the solutions across Canada that we know are working, and now we need to scale them up dramatically. We need to do a few key things if we're going to get there. One is to build more homes by reducing the cost of home building, making it easier to build homes, and changing the way that industry can actually build homes. We also need to make it easier, particularly for young people, to find a place that they can afford to rent or buy. And we can't forget that we need to serve the needs of people who can't afford a place to live, to ensure that everybody in this country has a roof over their head at night. If we can accomplish those three major things, we can actually solve the housing crisis, and we're going to experience a collective benefit as a result.
Very true. You set out the issue and the problem well. CIBC had a poll out yesterday, and I shared with you the results. 76% of Canadians who don't own a property say that entry to the housing market feels out of reach. 76% is pretty high. You must want to do this very quickly.
Yeah, I do. And you know, this isn't an academic conversation for me. It's a very real thing that's impacting my friends and my family. For at least a few months longer, I'm still in my 30s. Everybody I chat with who's my age and younger is rarely talking about the dream home they're going to live in one day. They're more focused on whether they can actually keep the place that they're renting now. We can change that. There is a deficit of hope amongst young people when it comes to the housing market today, but it doesn't have to be something that we accept. Now, there's going to be a number of people who are quite happy with the opportunity to rent a place in a livable community near the services and opportunities that they want for themselves. There will be others who want to own a home of their own where they can raise their family. And I think it's incumbent upon us to lay out a policy framework and inspire others to join us to make it a reality that people can choose their own kind of housing situation at a price that they can actually afford. So it's not lost on me that people feel the way that they do today. But my sense is, and I think it's my job, to put us on a policy track that convinces people that they can achieve home ownership should that be something that they want.
Practically speaking, one of the items that you've announced as getting some extra funding is a recommendation that's made by many task force out there, and that has to do with manufactured housing. But I mean, flash back to 5 years ago, people would think, I don't want to live in a trailer. But tell us how that has changed, because there's a very big difference of opinion now.
Well, one of the things that people, I hope we can communicate effectively to people is that the homes that are being manufactured today don't look like the homes that were being manufactured a number of years ago. There are apartment buildings that are being manufactured in factory settings. There are large standalone single-family homes that are quite nice that are being manufactured in factories today. I met recently with folks involved with the home manufacturing sector in Sweden, where almost 80% of the market is from manufactured homes, and they're known domestically for producing a higher quality that's more reliable along different styles. So I hope with the introduction of a national home design catalog, we're going to be able to not just talk about what homes of the future that are manufactured in factories look like. we can actually show them to people. I've been through a number of these that exist today that are providing homes for families that are spacious, near services and communities, that are walkable to schools, that are already hooked up to infrastructure. These are very real things that exist, and it doesn't mean that you have to settle for something less than. It just means that there's going to be a different process of creating the homes that people actually want.
Yeah, full disclosure here, both the minister and I are from Nova Scotia. We both went to St. Francis Xavier University.
Hail and
so
health.
I'm going to make an inside joke that you won't get, but it's not going to be Whidden's parking, mobile home parking.
Where I lived while I was a student,
well,
by the
there
way.
you go.
Yeah.
It's but reality, I mean, we grew up in an area where Kent Homes, for example, was everybody's starter home.
Yeah. And one of the things that you've got to realize is these kind of homes existed for different people over different parts of our history. Kent Homes was and remains a successful home manufacturer. After the war, everyone in different parts of the country has likely seen strawberry box homes, or victory homes as they were called. There's different styles that you can achieve that are designed for different family sizes. When I look actually at some of hop on a website for some of the home manufacturers today and look at the designs that they're actually already producing in factories, it would surprise you because they look, in some instances, identical to a traditional stick-built home, and you can achieve different levels of design. We need to now make sure that we're achieving a level of standardization for different kinds of designs that will achieve economies of scale, allow us to produce homes in a cost-effective and labor-efficient way so we can do it more quickly. But this is going to be a big part of the path forward. And we're not saying there's not going to be traditionally built homes. We're just saying we're going to be able to scale up the opportunities for different kinds of homes to be manufactured in a factory setting.
So is this going to be the Sean Fraser Christmas wish book? Is that the equivalent of it?
Look, it's not going to be about any one person. There's people who've talked about this, who've advocated it long before I have. This is going to be something that is going to change the opportunity for home builders to build homes for Canadians in every part of the country. But I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm going to link that specifically to productivity because you mentioned in there about being more labor efficient. Mm-hmm. Tell me how you are planning for better productivity with the announcements that you're making.
So this is an enormous challenge right now that I see. In fact, it's the one that may serve as the most challenging bottleneck to overcome in order to actually solve the national housing crisis. And I'm not interested at playing around the margins. This is a problem I actually think we can solve collectively. If we have the perfect set of measures in place to reduce the cost of home building, if we have perfect municipal zoning rules in Canada in every city across the country, we're going to run into a ceiling based on how many homes the Canadian economy can actually produce. We're producing near record levels, not quite at record levels, but not far off today. We need to grow the Canadian home building workforce, and we need to adopt new strategies to allow the workforce we have to produce more effectively. We're going to be making serious investments to train the Canadian workforce to have the skills necessary to build more homes. We're going to continue to use targeted immigration programs that will help attract people with the skills that we need, that we have a deficit of in Canada right now. And we're going to incentivize home building in factories so we can produce more homes with the labor that we have today. The enormous opportunity that I see is this going to create good paying jobs for Canadians. Construction is one of the industries that has the lowest cost barriers for people to get into the industry compared to the wages that workers actually earn. This is an opportunity to increase productivity, create good paying middle class jobs, and solve a very big social problem at the same time.
Okay, so you said immigration, so I'm going to ask you the question about immigration. How do you do this? How do you create more skilled workers at the same time as throttling back on immigration?
So to understand the solution, I think it's important to draw a distinction between our permanent residency programs and our temporary residency programs. We set every year as a federal government through the Immigration Levels Plan the total number of people who want to come and live in Canada permanently and work in Canada for the rest of their careers. That number, in my view, is in a pretty healthy spot. We're moving towards 500,000 over the next couple of years. And within that number, it's common for about ballpark 40% of the people who become permanent residents, they're already living here. They don't need a new home because they've been here for a number of years. There's an additional cohort of that group who's coming to be reunited with family members who already have a place to live. Within the program of people who are coming from another country to be here, we also take great care to incentivize people to move to parts of the country that may have greater capacity, including through the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, including through the Rural and Northern Immigration Program, both of which are now being made permanent. These are people who are coming to work in our healthcare system, to build homes, to work in the tech sector, agriculture, transportation, the workers that we need. When you look at the number of people who are net new, we're actually building enough homes today to more than accommodate that number of people. Where we need to make changes is on the temporary side of the equation. This has not historically been an area where the federal government sets an overall target or level for people to come in. It's been driven by demand set by employers who use a temporary foreign workers program, or by institutions who bring international students to Canada. What we saw coming out of the pandemic when the borders were closed was multiple cohorts of people were arriving at the same time when the borders opened up. In addition, particularly with the student program, we saw an explosion of applications for study permits from colleges and universities who were struggling with their bottom line, but didn't take any of the responsibility to build homes for the people who were coming to the communities where the campus was located. This demanded a change in approach, and Minister Miller's put forward new measures that's setting a cap on the total number of people to better align it with the capacity of communities to absorb that intake. So going forward, we are going to be managing not just the overall number and the permanent side of things, but also setting a level that's tied to the absorptive capacity of communities on the temporary programs. This is the right approach until things settle, but we're going to, at the same time, pursue a trusted partner model with post-secondary institutions and allow universities and colleges to bring more people in if they're providing the supports they need for them to succeed in their community, including housing.
Right. Minister, you said a couple paragraphs ago, we're building, but the federal government doesn't build. You're not a builder. The builders are the people who are going to have the contracts and build. And I know you're doing a lot of stuff to incentivize it. But you've got a big partner that you have to go through, and they're the provinces and the territories and the First Nations. Just a full disclosure, prior to this, because I didn't know the state of play of the relationship between my friend Paul Calandra and my friend Sean Fraser, so I actually Googled Calandra Fraser just so I could get the latest exchange of letters, sternly worded letters between the two ministers. And here's an interesting fact, if you do Google it yourself. There's actually a person whose name is Calandra Fraser, and wait for it, they're a bricklayer. So this was meant to be, you and Paul having, but I do want to ask a serious question about this. Look, in order for us to get anything done, we know that we have to work together. So if the provinces doesn't want to tell the municipalities how to run their zoning and their bylaws, why do you think the federal government should tell the provinces to hammer down on the municipalities?
So first, I think we should probably send information about our immigration programs to Calandra Fraser, who could, Calandra Fraser could potentially help solve some of these challenges. I like Paul. We get along well, and personally, we're sorting through a couple challenging issues right now, but despite the fact that we may have some challenging issues, particularly when it comes to affordable housing, there's good alignment when it comes to working together to establish a catalog of designs that will work. I sense there's good alignment on some of the tax policies that we want to put in place that will reduce the cost of home building. You're never, with anyone in your life, you're never going to agree on every single thing. I do think that, without exception, all of my counterparts do want to build more homes to meet the need that exists in their communities. Sometimes there's disagreements on how we get there. I think if I'm going to come into these conversations with credibility, I have to make sure that our own house is in order first. We are doing what we can to change the math for builders, to incentivize changes at other levels of government, to get back in the space of investing in affordable housing, and a series of other measures that I think are essential for me to have credibility in these conversations. When there are areas that are clearly not within our jurisdiction, we want to create incentives to adopt, to see the kinds of changes that will be adopted at different levels of government. The Housing Accelerator Fund is a great example, where we're not saying, cities, you must do this, because we don't have that authority. But if we're putting money on the table and say, we think this is going to change the equation for you, will you consider making the kinds of changes that will allow more density near transit stations, near post-secondary institutions, where infrastructure already exists, near opportunities for families and services? We can create an incentive that will inspire communities to change the way that homes are built to make it easier. So it's through a mix of conversations, incentives, and then exercising our own jurisdiction where appropriate that I think we can achieve these kinds of changes. But I do think we're going to find good partners in every province on a range of issues, and where we disagree, we'll still do our best to find ways to achieve progress.
Okay, because progress is what the 76% of Canadians who are worried about buying a home want. I'm going to take a look at Sligo. Thank you very much for putting it there, because I couldn't quite see it over here. I mean, I could ask you to pick one from the randomizer if you'd like to answer one. But what else? How can we balance building homes for Canadians while improving living standards and wages?
So I don't, sorry, I just want to make sure I understand this because I don't think that those are contrary to one another. I actually think as we build more homes, we're going to improve living standards and wages. As we build more homes, when you look at the dynamics between supply and demand, if you cure the supply gap, you're going to put downward pressures on prices that actually help with the standard of living that Canadians enjoy. And if you put people to work in the meantime, you're actually going to create good paying jobs which could elevate those wages. Now, thankfully, we are starting to see wage growth in Canada outpace inflation over the last couple of months, which is a positive shift after what we saw on the heels of the pandemic. So from my perspective, I actually think one will help lead to the other and prevent the inflation that we've seen on the price of a place to live from eating away at very real wage gains that people are starting to experience now.
One of the things that Minister Calandra announced yesterday in the Ontario Housing Update was that they were going to exempt publicly assisted colleges from the Planning Act to allow them to be able to build a little bit better. On the federal government side, do you see a role to directly help universities in terms of building student housing?
Absolutely. We made a really big change recently to the apartment construction loan program. So that's a program that we created with the purpose of incentivizing apartment construction at scale. By passing on the low rate of borrowing the federal government benefits from to those who are building apartments. Previously, student housing wasn't eligible, and we made that change because this could actually contribute a major solution. It's cheaper to build on a per unit basis student housing than other kinds of housing. But when somebody doesn't have to compete in the same market in the community because there's a home for them on or near campus, you actually can achieve more with the same level of investment. So we do insist that we get something back in return for passing on that low rate of interest. We demand that people who take part in the program make a certain number of the units available at a price level that reflects the median wage in a given community. With student housing, it's actually fairly easy to do because rents are typically much lower. So this is a tool that we have already made the change on that we expect is going to help scale up home building at colleges and universities and help provide a solution in the markets in which those campuses are located.
As I said at the beginning, you've been on a whirlwind tour. You had 4 days of announcements, tenants and renters, accelerator fund, the Canada Housing Infra Fund, transit funding. The list goes on, and I know that you'll be spending the next couple of months talking about it. But is there anything left in the budget?
Yeah, actually, look, I'll share some news with you now.
Exclusive!
Yeah,
fantastic.
That's right. Well,
I need my pen.
Tomorrow, we're actually going to be releasing our plan to solve the housing crisis in Canada. It's going to involve a series of measures that are going to do some of the things we've talked about. When it comes to reducing the cost of home building, we've already removed the GST. There will be more measures that make it more cost effective for builders. We're going to include some of the measures we've recently announced to help cities change the way they build homes around infrastructure, around the Housing Accelerator Fund. There's going to be supports, as we mentioned, for home building factories. Additional measures to help with the affordable housing stock in this country and to help communities who are wrestling with challenges around homelessness and encampments. And we're also going to have additional measures, including some that will be shared later today, designed to make it easier for people to get into the housing market for the first time. So there is more to come, significant new measures. You'll only have to wait about 24 hours.
Well, how long do I have to wait to find out if my taxes are going up?
Look, Minister Freeland is going to be releasing the budget next week, the fiscal projections.
See, the good stuff they're happy to talk about, right? The bad stuff, we all got to wait a little bit.
And I think we owe it to Canadians to be transparent in our budget process to demonstrate what we're spending money on and where the money's coming from. The budget is going to maintain a fiscal track that we believe is responsible, that's going to be focused on not driving inflation at the same time that we can increase productivity and meet some of the demands. The good news when it comes to investments in housing, and don't trust me, take the Governor of the Bank of Canada's words in this regard, investments in housing, given the supply shortage, can actually have a disinflationary impact because when you cure the supply gap, you can actually reduce the cost pressures overall. So it's about making the right kinds of investments with the money that we do spend through the federal budget process, but we'll include a full and transparent accounting in the budget process, of course.
As you will. You have a lot of focus on stock, building new stock. One of the first things you said when you became minister, and I told you your quote backstage, was you know that the problem is we have to build more stock. What the CIBC poll also says is that people are really struggling with down payment.
Yep.
Trying to figure out how to cobble it together. And I, just to let you know, it was 55% of Canadians feel they have to rely on an inheritance or a gift from their family in order to afford a down payment. Are there any tax credits that you're thinking of for these kinds of situations?
There's some measures we put in place already, and there's more that we're going to be sharing in the next day. So one of the things that I take a little bit of comfort in is we made a shift in the incentive that we created to help people save up for their first down payment. And it's not fair that someone's access to the housing market depends on how much money their parents earn. That's not what Canada is built upon. It's not the ideals that we hold. People should have a fair shot at getting into the housing market if that's what they want. The First Home Savings Account is a policy that allows you to save money tax-free in, tax-free out, that kind of takes advantage of both the RSP and TFSA model for people trying to buy their first home. What we've seen since the introduction of that policy is about 750,000 people have now signed up. Varying amounts of savings are put into the accounts for each person. But what it communicates to me is that there is a belief amongst at least that many young people in Canada that they will be able to get into the housing market, and they're actively taking steps to own a home now. There's other things that we're looking at that will make it easier for people to save up that down payment. There's other things we're looking at that we've announced already for renters who want to make that transition, but the bottleneck for them is a credit score in addition to the down payment to help their rent count for something. But there's other things we're going to do to try to reduce what that monthly payment will look like to get more people into the housing market as well.
Yeah. I know housing is the first term in your title, your housing, infrastructure, and communities, I think, is
That's right.
How it's styled now. But infrastructure writ large, especially trade infrastructure, that's really important to the long-term economic growth of the country. Are you focusing too much on housing, Minister?
Well, one of the things that people don't appreciate because the public focus has been on housing is I've not lost sight of the fact that I'm also the infrastructure minister.
Okay.
We are working to roll out a series of different policies, and the two are inextricably linked when it comes to certain kinds of infrastructure. So we don't want to build storage units for people. We want to build complete communities where people can thrive. That demands that we make investments in water and wastewater infrastructure so housing can be built, and when you turn the tap on, water comes out. It also demands that we invest in recreational facilities, community assets that make a place worth calling home. It also demands that we're going to build out transit infrastructure. And we do have a permanent public transit fund, and we hope to be reaching agreements with metro regions as soon as this year to fund for the long-term expansions of transit that will allow people to access the services and opportunities that their cities and their communities provide. But we also have to look, and this is where we get into one of your former portfolios around transportation, how we can actually invest in the kind of infrastructure that will create trade opportunities that are going to drive productivity and growth for the next generation. We come from the East Coast, enormous opportunities. When I see the global shipping patterns shift as the manufacturing base moves from China to South Asia and Southeast Asia, suddenly the East Coast of Canada becomes a more competitive transportation environment that could drive growth opportunities for our part of the world. There's unique opportunities that I see along those lines, both for people who are going to use our airports as through thoroughfares to do business in North America, or people who are going to be shipping goods. So there's enormous opportunities if we invest in our airports, invest in our port infrastructure, invest in our transportation networks across the continent to position Canada for enormous success. And I just see enormous potential, but a big part we need to solve is to make sure the workers have a place to live if they're going to be contributing to the economy.
And that's a great place to end it. Thank you very much, Minister. Appreciate it, everybody. Minister Sean Fraser.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.